Hey everybody, Chris here with Crisscross Crafts. Today I'm going to upgrade the spoil board on my Axiom AR8 Elite CNC. I had a bit slip a while back and ruined a few strips, so I'm going to take this opportunity to not only replace them, but I'm going to upgrade them as well as upgrade my existing pin fence system that I was using before. Stay tuned, I think you'll like it.
Alright, so let's take a quick look here in the Vectric software at the new spoil board and what exactly it is that I'm going to do. Obviously, the cutting parameters are not going to change from the previous version. The table itself is not going to change from the previous version, so that's an easy thing to carry over. And I'm certainly glad I took the time originally to lay this table out exactly, because this does make things like this much easier, as well as building different jigs and sleds. And if you didn't see my previous video, you might want to check that out, because I do go into depth on what I did to lay this out. But moving forward, so here is the old spoil board from Axiom. If I zoom in real close, you can see that the old spoil board was narrower on the ends than it was in the rest of the field. This had to be because they designed this for a smaller surfacing bit to be able to cover that size. Well, I have a larger surfacing bit, so what I've decided to do instead is go with a much larger spoil board. And if you look, if I remove the old spoil board, you can see the new spoil board has got the same size field all the way across, which I'm going to like. It's easy to reproduce, easy to make. The only change is I am putting a radius on all four corners. The reason being is that bit diameter that I have is 2 inches. The actual diameter is 2.5, but the cutting portion is only 2. So what this allows me to do is make sure that I can fully go outside of the entire perimeter when I do a surfacing path and ensure that I can get nice even results by radiusing this corner. This was not very hard. I simply radiused that, and when you take a look at my face view, you'll see that this is not a problem. I weighed in 2 options using 2 pieces of MDF, which would have given me an 1.5 inch table. I didn't really want to do that because I wasn't a huge fan of MDF being able to torque down into it. I didn't feel that that was a secure method. So instead what I've done is I'm going to use a 1/2 inch base, or a base of 1/2 inch plywood, Baltic birch. Glued to the top of that is going to be 3/4 inch MDF. So that will give me an 1.25 inch thick base, but that's okay. The Baltic birch does offer a much more stable base, and I can torque this bolt down as tight as I want, and it's not going to suck through the Baltic birch like it potentially could the MDF, nor will the Baltic birch wallow out when I'm using cam features against it, and so I don't have to worry about any of the wallowing out or the sucking the screw through. This is a much better alternative, I think, and you know, time will tell, but so far so good. So it will use a 7/8 inch bolt and a similar square head. And when we get into the table later, you'll see that this is a much heftier looking bolt than what Axiom's able to provide with the original spoil board. So I think I'm going to like that. All right, moving on up, let's take a look at the new screw holes. Axiom gave 5 screws per strip. Well, I felt like that just didn't offer enough, so I'm adding an additional 2. So now mine are going to have 7 screw holes, and that's going to offer much more stability, especially in conjunction with the Baltic birch base. Let's take a look at the fence system now. So if you remember from my previous video, I used 1/4 inch steel pins. Those worked fine, but over time that did wallow out a little. It didn't offer quite enough surface area to press against. And so what I've decided to do, I had a friend who does machining mill me up some 1/2 inch diameter steel pins, and they have a 3/8 post. So the 3/8 portion gets buried into the MDF. The 1/2 inch portion is resting on top, and you'll see those later in the video. But that does offer a much more stable positioning system, as well as more surface area to rest against. And I took note from Jay Bates. He added these in the middle of his table, and I thought, well, you know, that's a good idea. However, even though my machine is small, I may never use these, but I thought while I'm doing it, let's just do it. So these are added as well, but you can see I have plenty of positioning here. I've maintained my 1/4 inch pin in the corner for alignment. I still have I've got the 1/2 inch pins on top, so this does not have issue with any of my screw hole locations either. So I made sure that none of those were counterproductive to what I was trying to do. This one's close, but it does not cause a problem. So that is the new pin fence layout there. Moving along, the grid is not going to change. I may or may not use that. The surfacing tool path is not going to change. And of course the dimensions of the set does allow me to be able to come down here and create this special jig. So if I come down here, these dimensions are going to allow me to make this jig for alignment here to keep the strips at a set distance from the front of the table. This little jig here will allow me to set up from the edge of my table to the first spoil board. That's this spacing here. This rests against the edge of the table. This is my spacer to the edge of the first spoil board. Then I'm able to flip this over and use this part of the jig as spacing between each of the strips. So having this information gave me very good data to be able to make this little setup jig. So now these two pieces here are going to be what lock it all together. And so the setup jig for the front, the spacing jig for the side and the top, this is going to help me set up and be able to reproduce this very easily and make sure over time that nothing is moved. It all starts with cutting the strips. Since these strips are longer than my CNC will actually cut, I will be cutting these on the table saw. So I ease up on the right size. And that's close enough. And so then I start cutting out the base pieces out of the Baltic birch. Now the idea here is the Baltic birch, I'm going to actually cut two sides. So I get all my strips cut and then migrate over to the MDF. And this is where I messed up. I meant to cross cut this sheet, not rip the sheet, but hey, we all waste material somewhere, and clearly I wasted a lot on this one. So anyway, the MDF gets cut slightly larger than the Baltic birch did as far as the width and length, because what I'm going to wind up doing later is once I glue these together, I'll flush trim those, and you'll see that later. A lot of gluing, and I took advantage of having my Matchfit workbench to do this. So I simply glued the Baltic, stuck on a piece of MDF, put the next Baltic in place, and the MDF, and just made a long sandwich. Glue and stack, and then kind of adjust to get them kind of right, and then start clamping it down. And that's the beauty of having the MDF slightly larger than the Baltic. I don't have to be too precise with this. It's a little time consuming, but man, this is a whole lot easier than gluing each of these pieces independently or trying to sandwich glue them with a parallel clamp or something like that. This Matchfit workbench, fantastic. So there you go. The Baltic is slightly recessed from the MDF, which means later that makes it easy to come back and flush trim smooth. And this is my first project on the new SawStop. Notice that the strips originally got cut on the old Delta. Now they're getting fine-tuned on the new SawStop. Also a good example of both the fence dust collection as well as the below the table dust collection. I do like this setup. Enough with the boring routing. Now that I've got everything flush trimmed, two of the strips have to have radius on each corner. So these are the two end strips, so I'm marking in to allow for that radius. So I'm using the Saker Scribe tool here and being able to easily use that to get the radiuses marked. Then I'm just rough cutting them with the jigsaw, kind of staying kind of close to the line. And I'm using this little portable belt hand block to clean that up. So before I did anything, I ran a couple test pieces to make sure that the amount of boring bits were going to bore for the new pins without any problems. So here's a quick look at the old top. As you can see, the 1/2 inch bit that slipped did some significant damage across at least the left side of my table. Made it pretty rough. So I got all the strips all cut, flushed, ready to go. And what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to deal with two different kind of pockets here. One is going to be a pocket that's going to bore all the way around through the MDF down to the Baltic birch, and then the other is going to be a through hole for that bolt to go through. So this first step is drilling out the pocket for the screw hole or the countersink. And I'm just using a 1/4 inch end mill, using a spiral ramp on an inside profile, and that does very well for that hole. And this was a production piece, so there was a lot of start and go and start and go. I do love that repeat machine feature on the Axiom. That made this particular process very easy. And as I stated earlier, Axiom originally put 5 holes. I added additional 2, so we've got 7 holes. Next, it's time to drill through the Baltic birch to allow for that bolt. So I used the 5/16 brad point bit in the boring adapter. And if you've never drilled with a boring bit on the CNC, this really is the way to go. I mean, it is so fast. Feel free to check out the drilling video I have previously. I'll link it right here above. Whereas end mills aren't really designed to plunge, the boring bits are, and it makes quick work of it. Now it's time to remove all the old strips and get the new ones on. And you can see the significant difference in the size of the bolt. The little jig makes quick work of lining those up. That's why it's important to have yourself these setup jigs. It does make life very easy to both set the ends so they're all the same, and then get all your strips initially set so that whenever you have to, if you ever have to reset them, it's real easy to do so. I did find that the gauge block needed to be just a little bit more sized. So I did correct that thickness on that spacer piece that spaces each of the strips. And this was a long, tedious process, but needed if you're going to do it. And there you go.
So I have X to Y, X on the X-axis is 0. On the right side, just a little under 0, right at a 1/2,000. If I rotate that, you can see about the same, right at 0, and just a hair under 0. I don't know about you friends, that's good enough for me. I can't get that any better. If I start fiddling with that, all I'll do is mess that up. I've got a 10,000th shim on the bottom in the back to cant the CNC that way. Beyond that, we're good to go. So there you go. You can see that shim right there using that feeler gauge.
All right, now that everything's trimmed, the new table's installed, it's time for surfacing. And yes, I did leave the dust boot on for this, so you're just going to have to imagine what's happening. This MDF is nasty, but in combination with this dust boot, that Amana RC22-55, and that amazing Rikon Cyclone, I got very little dust coming through that. That's coming out of that, rather. All right, now that it's surfaced, it's time to bore all the holes for the pin fence. And again, I'm using the Amana boring bits with the 3/8 inch brad point. It does make quick work of that.
So this was the previous pin fence. It was a simple 1/4 inch steel pin that I used. I had a friend mill these out for me. These are 3/8 inch diameter, and they've got a 1/2 inch diameter system. All I did here was I increased the width so I get a much bigger piece on the end than the way Axiom sends them from the factory, which gives me a lot more meat over here on the side. So by adding the larger dowels and increasing the width, this gives me much more space to be able to lock that in. Incorporate in my little tenon, my little spacing jig that I've used to space these out appropriately, and this whole system will be able to easily be repeatable and reset up to make sure everything is accurate every single time. Hey everybody, Chris here with Crisscross Crafts. Today we're going to upgrade the foil boards. Had a bit slip a while back, ruined quite a few of them, so I'm going to take the opportunity to not only upgrade them, but I'm going to make them better, and I'm going to go ahead and improve upon my pin fence system that I had used. It's only me. That's all it is. Let me show you. So I went to drill out the new pin locations for the new spoil board, which worked perfect. I did a test, and these things are dead on tight. Perfect. Okay? Tonight, when I drill them, they're loose like a tooth. I thought, okay, maybe it's the MDF. So I come over here and I re-drill my test piece, and it's all a little loose too. I have 0.374 on this, 0.38 on all of these. How? Same bit, same setup, same specs. Everything is exactly the same, except for the hole size. To figure that one out. Welcome to my life.